from the island areas. And I said, well, I think that's very good. He said, how long do you think we should wait before we actually start? I said, oh, something like 6 months. Because I had students that I believed could be working at university level, and it just wasn't there for them. A few were being sent through to Avondale. That didn't work out too well. Not very many of them came back to work in the islands. They'd get the bug of staying in this part of the world rather than going back. But if we could train for island conditions with courses that were designed for the work in the islands, it would be much better, I felt. So he said, yes, thank you for that. He said, I'll keep working on it. Well, I didn't hear any more about it until I was sent off to go to a general conference meeting that was actually held in Vienna, in Austria. And I took 2 men from Papua New Guinea with me, Papua New Guinea ministers, and one of them had never been out of Papua New Guinea before, and we had lots of fun. I could tell you lots of stories on that trip. But while I was there at the general conference session, one of the tents that they had, or one of the booths that they had, was from Andrews University, and the lady that was looking after that was the wife of Dr. Murdoch. Now, Dr. Murdoch had been the principal at Avondale College when I was going through my training, so I knew Mrs. Murdoch. She was also a Dr. Murdoch, and so I called in and started talking with her, and she asked me what I was doing. I was principal at Sonoma College, and I had managed to do a little bit of university work. She said, well, why don't you go a little further and do your doctorate? And I said, well, there's no chance of that. I have been doing all my university work so far by correspondence, but you don't do your doctorate that way. Well, some do now, but it wasn't available at that time. And she said, well, what have you done? And I started to tell her the coursework that I had done and so on. And she was scribbling down on a piece of paper. And at the end of it, she said, you know, I think that it wouldn't take you any more than 2 years, perhaps even less, to get your doctorate if you came through to Andrews. And I said, well, I would not be able to go unless the church decided that I should go. I had always got permission from my overseeing committee before I even took new subjects in the course that I was doing. I'd always explained it to them. And incidentally, when I was doing my study, I had to meet half my expenses, and sometimes that required me to travel down to New Zealand for 2 or 3 weeks to a course down at Massey College. And it's not easy when you're on a missionary's wage to find the extra money that you need for that kind of thing. But it all worked out, and my family helped me well. So I went to the president of the South Pacific Division, who was there at the General Conference meetings, and I said, I have been talking to Dr. Ruth Murdoch about the possibility of me doing some university work at Andrews, getting a doctorate. Do you think that would be a good idea? He said, yes, find out all you can about it, because you don't know, we might need to have somebody with that kind of qualification. So that was the first thing that I heard about them wanting me to have a doctorate. So I did write to Andrews then and filled out some forms, and they accepted me for the program, so I let the division know that, and the next thing I was told was, oh, about the end of next year we want you to go to Andrews and complete your doctorate there. And they even told me, they said, we want you to do it in the area of facility planning and administration, education administration, those two strands. And I said, oh, okay. I would have chosen different strands, but they were the ones that they chose. So then I went across, and when I came back from Andrews, and incidentally, the Lord helped me, I only spent 21 months on the program. It wasn't 2 years even that I spent, and had my piece of paper, which they needed. And so then I came back and they said, now it's not really convenient to try and attach you to a school or college at this stage, because that was July that I got back to Australia. They said, what we want you to do is to take an office here in the division, and we want you to write what you feel is needed for a new tertiary level college for the islands. And see, I'd just been doing facility planning and education administration. So I sat down, and for a little over 2 months I worked on an outline of what I felt would be necessary, what courses should be offered, how many staff I felt would be necessary for that, and all of that kind of thing. And they kept encouraging me and say, yes, that's good, that's what we wanted, yes, that's good. And then they did send me out to finish off the year, taking over from a person who had had to retire from his principalship in Fiji, a school called Navasau. So I was out there for nearly 2 months for the end of the year. I finished off that year. Near the end of the year, they said, look, we're not ready to use you for the new college yet, because that's what they had decided. They said, we'll send you for a time being to Kambubu High School in Papua New Guinea. So I went there, and I was principal there for 3 years. In that time, they had chosen the land where they were going to build this new tertiary college. They looked in Fiji, they looked in the Solomon Islands, they looked at Papua New Guinea. They looked down in the area close to Lae, because there's university there. One of the things that I had suggested in my write-up on what I felt they needed was that we should possibly be near one of the other university entities like UPNG or USP, if possible, because we could possibly use their library facilities and have some kind of liaison with them that would help us in working out our programs and the levels and that kind of thing. So they looked for land in all of those areas, and the piece of land that they liked best was the land that they now have for PAU. It worked out that that land was being operated by a big dairy company that was from New Zealand, and they had cattle on that land. The land belonged to the Koiari people up in the hills behind Port Moresby, and it happened that the president of the Central Papua mission, with headquarters in Port Moresby, was Yorihibo, a man from the Koiari area. And when he heard that they were wanting that land, he said, oh yes, that's good land. He said, I'll go and talk to my people. Now, the government was approached by the Agriculture Department of Papua New Guinea saying, we would like that land, we would like to divide it up and have it as special demonstration farms to bring people in and teach them, pardon me, how to use the land well so that we could have more modern farming methods in Papua New Guinea. And the government said, yes, that seems to be a good idea. And then one of the top men in government said, I would like that land. I would run a big piggery. I would provide all of the pigs that Port Moresby and other parts nearby need. That land should come to me and my family. And the Kuari people were asked, you can help decide what this land will be used for. And Pastor Yori Hebel spoke to them. He said, look, if we have a church-run university-level program there, your young people will be able to come and get their training there. It will be a blessing to us, and God will look after it. It will become God's land. And they finally decided, they told the government, we wanted to go to the Seventh-day Adventist Church for their college. And everybody was surprised. They said, wow, why? How come these people are getting it? But I believe it was God that had a really strong hand in that. Now, a little bit about the land itself. The land was covered even before they started their dairy farms there. Oh, thank you very much. Just put it on the table. Me take maata. Thank you very much. Sorry, that's Cook Island Maori. Vina valevu. That's my language, Fijian. And the land was covered with grassland, and the Koiari people used to come down there to try and take things from the coastal people. The people that lived along the coast actually had lookouts on guard on the hills. There are hills between where PAU is and where the airport is in Papua New Guinea. And on those hills you can still see the caves where they had their guards stationed, watching to see if the Koiari people were coming across. And it was actually their fighting land between the people of the coast and the Koiari people from the foothills. And so it had an interesting background. Then after that, for some years, it was a piggery. After that, it grew tobacco. After that, at the time of the Second World War, the American Army took it over and turned it into a big army camp. And on the land that the university has there, there are still big concrete bases from various buildings, and there was still some old machinery and stuff around the place. And there were places where the children were playing and dug up a whole lot of live ammunition. It had been the army dumping ground as well for some things. And what's more, we used to laugh a little bit about the creek that flows through because its name was Whiskey Creek. And it was called Whiskey Creek because when the Americans were there, they put a little bit of a dam, a weir, across the creek, and they used the water from it in making some illicit grog. And so the creek was called Whiskey Creek. So land with quite an interesting background. But the land was finally given to the church, or it's not actually sold to the church, it's leased. But it's on a 99-year lease and a right of renewal at the end of that time. And it was the government that leased the land, and then subleased it to us, because if we had leased directly from the Koyari people, we could only lease it for 25 years. But the government is the only place that can lease for long periods of time. And so the government leased it for 99 years, and then they allowed the church to take over the lease. And what's more, the government helped us, particularly in the setting up of the college, by passing an act through their parliament that said that the Pacific Adventist College was an entity that they authorised to offer university degrees. We could have gone right up to doctorates. We didn't even consider that at that stage. And could also have other campuses that were subsidiary campuses to it. And they gave us all kinds of powers which haven't even been used yet. But that is the reason that today Fulton College in Fiji and Sonoma College in another part of Papua New Guinea are offering degrees that are actually Pacific Adventist University degrees. And the other colleges, Fulton and Sonoma, have to submit students' work and examination results and so on, exams themselves, to PAU, because it is kind of the umbrella to the work of our tertiary education in the islands. Now, the government at that stage was working on the idea for their government act of parliament to set us up. And so the division appointed me as the principal to this new college, even though there was no college there at that stage. And I would spend part of my time in Australia, part of my time up there. And in Australia, we would be going through with the lawyers on the act that the government was making out and making changes and suggestions to them, saying, yes, this would be all right with us. No, we wouldn't like it this way. And then I would have to bring that up to Port Moresby, and I would go to the Education Department, and we would submit it then to Parliament to look at, and they would make some suggestions, and it went backwards and forwards like that for most of a year. And then they finally, in August something, in 1982, they actually passed the Act and set us up. At that time too, I managed to have the first of the staff members come and actually live on the college land. We already had the library set up. In fact, by the time the college classes started, we had over 20,000 books classified on shelves. The library was ready to be used as an entity. Brian Townend, who is still in the retirement village where Lowell and I are living, was our first librarian. He did a very good job setting that up. And one of the ladies, young ladies, the Papuan young ladies that helped him at that time, working as a kind of a secretary, and it's quite interesting because Brian and this girl were kind of trying to outdo the other. Brian was trying to write up the notes for the classification of books faster than the girl could type. And the girl was set out on absolutely insistent on being able to keep up with him and even be able to say, I'm waiting. I don't have anything to do at the moment. And they really worked hard at it, and it was very good. It worked well. One of the things that they did for us when they were getting the land ready and setting out where the buildings were going to be was to make us three artificial lakes. Two of them pretty much together, and one over where the village people were going to be. One of the things too that I suggested to the division was, when we have married students, I want you to arrange those houses like a village, so that we can have the people in that area